thinking. I need them to do something else. It's
The
bad.
thinking.
I just
Yes.
hate the contemplation scenes.
Yes.
I can't.
I am all in my
Yes.
stop thinking about, all the things, but at the same time, if you don't do those things, like it can, be a problem.
They
The
need
reader
to,
can get
they need
confused.
to stop and think. I'm just bad at making them stop and think. And when they do think, they just spiral like my actual thoughts.
I mean, to be fair, that is partially realistic. Unless your character doesn't have anxiety, then it's not realistic.
I don't know how to write someone without that. I actually created one of my characters to have it because I couldn't write him without it.
You're just like, I'm sorry, buddy. Pat, pat.
You have it now.
This is all my characters have anxiety. He's all gonna have trauma.
There's that too.
Yeah, one
all
of
right.
them doesn't have anxiety, and I'm like, I don't know how to write you anymore.
So, the first bit that I'm going to do is dispel a myth. A lot of you have probably heard the myth that if it's boring to write, you should just skip it because the readers don't want to read it.
That's
False.
what I heard today.
The reason why that is false is because of the fact that this terrible advice makes you think, oh, I'm bored, so I should skip it. The most important character development scenes that ever happen are usually boring for you to write because you prefer action and drama. So, how do we fix that? They're not saying, the problem with the advice is the fact that it doesn't give a qualifier. Now, I'm going to give the qualifier. This is good advice with a big fat butt attached. Yes, haha. And that is the fact that you need to look at what purpose the scene serves and then be able to important threads for that scene. Now, discussing purposes. You need at least 2 out of these 4 options for purpose of your scene. Otherwise, your scene will fall flat. You need at least 2. Now, the 4 things that you can have are plot, character, world building, or foreshadowing. It needs at least 2 of those. If it only has 1 of those, you gotta find another one to stuff in there because it adds more to the scene. The reason why it's probably because it's not giving you any sense of suspense. And building up character can add suspense. Building up the plot can add suspense.
Well,
building up world building can do suspense. Foreshadowing being the dun 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 moment, that adds suspense. That makes you intrigued. That makes you go, I want to see where this is going. And if they are right, if you're bored, then the readers won't want to read it. But that's when you say, okay, but this moment is important. So how do I make it so that I'm enjoying this? Because they're right. If you're not enjoying writing the scene, your readers aren't going to enjoy reading the scene. That's part of the problem with, writing. But that doesn't mean you can't apply the things that make it interesting back into the scene and infuse it with some of that intrigue. And sometimes it's even just about the way things are said. Communication trope might seem dumb, but a lot of people miscommunicate a lot of the time. We live in a world where miscommunication is so heavy. People that aren't that bright out there. I was just looking at a recipe the other day, and the comment below said 1 star, and I was like, 1 star? Why is that they're giving this 1 star? I substituted cream cheese for cottage cheese, and it turned out bad. And I'm like, well, duh. So sometimes people don't think things all the way through. And then it got better.
Like
I saw another
powder
one.
and baking soda.
Yes, and then I saw an even dumber one where someone literally rated it 1 star, and they were like, my coconut cake turned it out so bad because I added shredded cheese instead of shredded coconut. Because they're both shredded, right? And I was like, how? That's exactly what
My dude, that's not how it works.
Cheese is painful.
Oh my gosh, look at my
Your notebook's gonna die. But anyway, just the crack as your notebook just died. But anyway, so point being though is yes, people can do dumb stuff. Not saying they can't, but sometimes that's why miscommunications happen, because someone's dumb, or because someone's irrational, or because a button gets pushed that someone doesn't even know about. This is one of my favorite things that can add drama, is pushing people's buttons. Not intentionally per se, but accidentally. We have that happen where, you might say something and your friend gets really, really offended and you're like, what the heck even just happened? And then you learn that they were like bullied in school for it and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was not aware. Exactly. People being traumatized even on a minor scale can add a lot of drama, because sometimes when you push that button accidentally, the person explodes and you're like, whoa, what just happened here? That's why TV and drama can do this a lot. I was even just watching the other day, and that was part of the interestingness of the trauma, was the fact that they were like, we have given so many paranormal things. They were like, we have given so many monsters a second chance and been like, dude, be a good guy, and then they murder someone. I'm not giving this monster a chance. And they're like, but they're literally a child. And they're like, guess what? Still evil. But that's because they had been traumatized 7 other times. So they had a logic behind it in their own head, even if it didn't make sense to the viewers.
Like a character in, like, there's 2 characters in my book, and one who's had a bad experience with authority in the past, and the other one had a bad experience when he deviated from the authority. And so
that can be a great dynamic. Yes,
things.
exactly. Having where their entirely different perspectives make it so that they're arguing over something, that can add intensity to a scene. That can add drama
and they
to a
both
scene.
have kind of good reasons.
Yes, question or comment.
On the topic of trauma.
Yes.
On
the topic of trauma. Things you only hear in Writers Club.
I feel like trauma is a really good way to like make people evil because it's so
also true.
It can
It's
be
so damaging.
so like hard and like damaging.
Yeah,
that,
like I was thinking for an emperor in my book that what if when he was a kid, his people tried to kill him and his mother.
Exactly. Those kind of things really scar you, and then you're messed up.
And because of that, he has a robot arm now.
See, exactly. Epic backstory, by the way. But those kinds of things can make it so that your characters are more interesting, and therefore your boring scenes become less boring because you know the depth behind it. Even if you don't tell your reader yet, even if it's a secret from your reader, they don't know. It's more interesting to you, and therefore you're able to write it in a way that is more intriguing. Because you know, hey, this is the traumatic, dark backstory behind my villain, so when I talk about him, he's more interesting now. People go, why? Tell me more. And that's what you want from your readers. You want them leaning forward. You want them being like, come on, more. Give me more. So another thing that can help with boring scenes, if you're like, hey, I've already got 2 things, I've got world building and plot or character and foreshadowing, whatever you have out of the 4, then you're like, this still isn't working. This is still just a really boring scene. It's just very dry. We don't want our scenes to be dry. We want them to be like a nice moist cake. We don't want to be dry, eating them and being like, crackers.
I don't know.
Yep, I noticed.
On the topic of crackers.
So we were talking. I was using it as a metaphor for like when you don't have enough context to the scene and like how to add context to the scene, because your reader can get really boring of the same thing over and over and over again. Just like if you ate crackers all day, your mouth would get very dry and very sad.
No, not if you hold them in your mouth and you add another cracker.
That's not how that works, Sadie.
No, it is. Yes, it is.
That's called saliva if you have no water.
It works though.
If you have no water and you're dehydrated.
But then you make some water.
No, you can't if you're dehydrated. Sadie, you know how dehydration works.
You can't go wrong with cream puffs though.
Cream puffs are so good.
All right.
What is this conversation?
All right. So
You can
back
drink the cream
on
puffs.
topic, ways to spice up your scenes that are just those 2 things. Because if you've already added, like I said, your 2 things out of the 4, and you don't have anything else, and you're like, this is still just boring. There are 2 things that can help to add. You can either change the setting. So, for example, having a conversation that is really boring in the middle of a field, not too interesting. However, having the same conversation like on the top of a cliff is going to be much more intense, much more interesting. You're like, okay, this gives dynamics feeling to it. The next thing is humor. Adding humor into the moment can add a little moment where they find it funny enough that they're willing to keep listening to whatever you have to say, even if it is dry, even if it is kind of boring. They're like, ha, that was funny, so I'm going to keep watching. Or I'm going to keep reading, or fill in type of medium. And so as a result, adding in that humor can give it a little bit more of that texture that makes it less boring for your reader. And the last thing is adding in general, like I was just saying earlier, secrets, especially in their backstory. because then they're reacting to things that we don't even know, and then we're confused about them and who they are, and so we want to learn more. Exactly. And so we want to know more about, like, why did they react like that? Why is this happening? Why are they saying that? That doesn't seem like something they would say, especially if they're acting out of character, right? Where they're just like, ugh, I'm so angry right now, and you're like, why though? And then you learn, oh, all this crap is going on behind the scenes, and we have no idea. So having some sort of secrets or humor or changing the setting can help spice up the conversations that are already kind of naturally boring, but are necessary for, like I said, plot, character, world building, foreshadowing, etc. The last thing that I'm going to say regarding world building, the problem that you might run into with world building is world building too much to the point where the reader's like, holy crap, I just died. Yes, yes, info dump, where you literally just say, by the way, here's my entire world. Everybody wants world building, right? Just like everyone in general is like, I want food. But, however, we don't want food chucked at our face aggressively. And that's what an info dump does. Where it's like, okay, if you set the food in front of me and I ate it slowly, we're fine. That's when you spread it out and put it throughout the novel. But when you're chucking it at them aggressively, they're not gonna want it. They're like, excuse me, I'm leaving. So, with world building, make sure it's spread out. Make sure you do it small little patches. Make sure you only mention what is relevant to the current scenario. Yes, Sadie.
I think that even though Aragon sometimes is a little big for me, like a big book, but I think it does a pretty good job of like spacing out the world building, because I feel like with that type of book, it's easy to just info dump.
Yes.
Because like he goes to the guy and he like is telling him the legends, and right there would be a good place to like blah all the stuff about the story. But he only tells like the specific part that's relevant to that, which is the dragon part. This is why it's important that you stick with what's relevant or what needs to be foreshadowed. If it doesn't need to be foreshadowed and it's not relevant to the current present time, you probably shouldn't world build that until later. Or you're gonna make your readers feel aggressively like you're throwing stuff out. Like how he did the dragons and like the dragon rider stuff, but then later he did like some other stuff about like the king and the kingdom and things. Because at the time it was not relevant and you didn't need it. Yeah. But then when it became relevant, he brought it back into the fold. And yes, you can bring stuff up early when it comes to foreshadowing, but in those cases, don't make it too obvious that it's foreshadowing, because that's another problem. If you're like, here's some foreshadowing, we go, I'm suspicious, but I'll take it. But if someone goes, here's some foreshadowing, and throws it at your face, you're like, no, please help. So be gentle, be subtle. Like, yes, you do need a few blunt foreshadowings, but you can't be too blunt. It's kind of like the moment when you go, here, catch, and you throw an apple at someone. You're like, okay, weird, but all right. Whereas if you're just blindsiding them with an apple to the face, I think they're going to get mad.
Yeah, that's what I just did.
So with foreshadowing, make sure that it's blunt, but it's not so blunt that you're blinding your character just out of nowhere. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is actually addressing Sadie's concern with regards to thinking.
I'm so bad right in those scenes.
Sometimes you need your character to have a good think, right? You're like, they need to consider their actions, they need to consider what's going wrong, or maybe they're even just locked in a solitary cell in prison. That involves you thinking, I should hope.
That's literally the false prince, bro.
No,
He's locked in a cell for the majority of that series.
Majority, yeah, he gets locked up a lot. I was about to say book one, and then I was like, no, you're right. It's like
he's locked up like every book. So.
But the point is, he does a lot of thinking. How does she make that interesting? Well, because most of the time,
sometimes his personality makes it interesting. He's got such a
the way he describes things and the way he says things and the way he even thinks about things makes you go like, huh, I'm intrigued, rather than just being like, that tree sucks. That's not interesting. But if you say, that tree sucks, it reminds me of my really abusive grandmother, and you're like, why though? Then you're suddenly intrigued. You're like, okay, by the way, my grandmothers were both amazing ladies, but you're like, if that's the descriptor, you're like, okay, I want to keep listening to this person. They are just thinking, but I don't care. I want to hear more of that.
Oh, yes. There's such a good book. It's called Sons of Day and Night by some lady, Mariposa, that's her name.
I was like, wait,
no, okay. I can't remember her name. It was kind of like different, but really good for like the thinking scenes are really interesting, especially because like when one of the characters specifically is thinking, it alludes a lot to like his backstory, because like a lot of the times he's thinking, he's like, I will never give them that thing because of what my mother said like a billion years ago, and then he's like, but I can't, I just can't give it to them, and he like kind of bounces around that fact until one moment where he's like actually thinking about it. That was traumatizing.
Sometimes that can also help with foreshadowing too, where they have weird thoughts that you're like, that doesn't quite fit with the scene, but then later when you learn things, you're like, that fits perfectly.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens there. He's thinking about this random thing that he's not going to give to the people, and he's like, my poor parents. You're like, what?
Relevant. And then you're like, oh, actually, that's super relevant.
Yeah, it's so relevant. Oh,
so when you're having thinking scenes, adding in things like that, like we said earlier with the secrets or things like that that you don't directly address, or addressing things in a weird, quirky way, because we do all have weird ways of thinking about things. The way that you think about something is going to be different than the way she does, than the way he does, etc. Everyone thinks about things in drastically different ways. We aren't all like linearly thinking the exact same thing. Like if I asked you to describe what this room looked like right now, you guys would all describe it drastically differently because you're unique individuals. So give your character that same weird, quirky personality traits where they think things and you're like, that is just so uniquely them. No one else would say that. Or if they would, you can even make fun of them for it. I know that the TV show I'm currently watching does that a lot, where one of the main characters says awesome so often that they actually made fun of it in one of their episodes where they were like, oh yeah, we went to an alternate reality where we are actors in a TV show. And they're like, he has to say awesome at least 5 times in an episode. And so it made fun of the fact that his character says awesome so much. And so it's fun sometimes to even make fun of your characters when they're doing weird, quirky things or weird dialogue or thinking things. And that can also add some interesting flavor to your boring scenes. All right. Any other questions about writing boring scenes, or have we sufficiently covered the topic?
I may have been a little bit distracted during the thinking section. All I heard was the one about like their personality. Are there any other tips for writing good thinking scenes?
Fair enough. So another thing that I went over was in general what kinds of things would affect how they think. So in general, like for example, I mentioned that there's this character that I know in a TV show that says awesome a lot. And so as a result, that will bleed into their thought process too. Most people think similarly to the way they speak. Really? And so as a result, you want their dialogue and their internal dialogue to sound pretty much the same. And then it can also be interesting having them describe things around them in a very unique way. Another thing that I actually forgot to mention, but I definitely should, it's in my notes, is once again the scene. When you have someone thinking, that's not very interesting. But what they're doing while they're thinking can be very interesting. For example, if I'm just sitting in my room staring off into space, that's not very interesting. However, if I'm twiddling with a knife, suddenly you're intrigued. Suddenly I become sinister.
If you're thinking about your brother and you're twiddling a knife,
exactly. Suddenly you go from being like, ugh, that guy is so annoying, to being like, that guy is so annoying, twiddling with knife. It's like, no, that took it to 11. Like that. So then exactly. Thoughts paired with what actions they're doing while they're thinking can be very intriguing and be very interesting, and add that kind of depth of flavor to those boring scenes.
That happens a lot in mangas, actually. They do a good job of having them do interesting actions when they're thinking.
Yes, exactly.
Like, there's this guy from Jujutsu Kaisen.
And then I did see your head.
There's this guy from Jujutsu Kaisen who, like, whenever he's thinking, he will sometimes be, like, doing bad things to other people when he's thinking. Like, he'll be, like, there's this thing he does where he, like, can, like, morph them. But he'll, like, morph them while he's thinking. He's like, and, like... It's like, it's pretty interesting.
No, it's true. It is fascinating, honestly, to see those kinds of things. But honestly, it changes the tone of the conversation, you know? Like, for example, if I'm staring at a wall, if I'm throwing a ball at the ceiling and catching it while I'm thinking, oh, that guy's so annoying, you might think, oh, maybe they're annoying because they're a rival on my sports team or something like that. Like, it changes the tone.
Yeah, like when in Haikyuu and Kageyama is thinking while he's setting, and he's like, how can I improve my game?
Exactly. So you're like, okay, interesting. And then, like you said, if they're like stabbing a knife into the table repeatedly while thinking, oh, they're so annoying, you're like, okay. Exactly. You feel like they're a psycho all of a sudden.
Sherlock does that a lot too. He does stuff like that.
Or if you have them like sitting there going, oh, they're so annoying, and they're like wiping off their hands with hand sanitizer. You're like, maybe this person is gross. Maybe who they're thinking about is gross.
I thought they were wiping blood off their. Yeah. That's what I went to immediately.
Or you could go the psychotic route. But my point is that you can have all these intriguing things that make it like so much more dynamic than just there is a thought crossing your mind. You have
we all went to blood. Is it possible the twilling but their thoughts are just the most pure space ever?
Then I'm honestly more concerned in some ways. I'd be like, why does like
Who gave the child a knife?
exactly either who gave the child a knife or ultimate psychopath? Like literally, how are you thinking about how your pet bunny must be lonely while also like stabbing a table?
Okay.
I'm concerned. Even then, I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, most people I know who fidget with knives are not thinking kind things, and so if you are in some ways, I'm more concerned about you. He does have a knife collection, but he never fiddles with them unless he's actively wood carving or something like that.
Fair enough.
So, not as concerning.
I'm just like,
Yes, my husband has a knife collection, yes, but he strictly uses it for things like whittling or opening boxes. Like, he never takes them out unless it's those scenarios. And so, as a... Now, that's because he also likes to polish his knives sometimes just because it's relaxing, which, again, less concerning. So, I guess it all depends. When you say twiddling with the knife, what exactly does that mean? You know, what defines
to be fidgeting with a knife.
Well, maybe it does if you're a CIA agent or something like that. So you also gotta give context. But whereas if you're just like a random 6-year-old playing with knife, you're like, exactly, like staring in concern.
Something that happened. Yeah, no, never mind.
Never mind. Okay, squints.
But
Anyway,
no, never
any other questions about boring scenes and how to improve them? Yes.
Why did we get talking about a knife?
Don't worry about it.
Mainly off topic because of the fact that we were discussing like ways to enhance scenes, and if you're having someone thinking while holding a knife, it's immediately more interesting than if they're just holding nothing.
I'm holding nothing.
I'm holding air.
Exactly.
Air is something.
Yes, question.
Yes. So what's the best way to like express internal dialogue by third person?
Third person? I mean,
If someone is like
You can
they
have
couldn't do this because this like it's like
you can have them
the
think.
narrator's saying that they're thinking.
so yes
but
and
not
no.
like first person.
So third person, you can just have them think. You just put it in italics and you keep going. As long as it's limited third person. If it is omniscient third person, where you're talking about everyone, or you're having some sort of other narrator be like,
That's a manga.
blah blah blah. Exactly. A great example of this is the book series Good Omens, where the whole time it's being narrated by Agnes Nutter, and she's a fancy British lady. But anyway, and so it's an interesting and compelling way of having it like told. But she, with the thoughts and whatnot, she describes what she thinks they're thinking, which is equally more interesting because of the fact that the way she describes it is very interesting. It's like if you told me what you were thinking and then I tried to describe your thoughts in my own words. It's more interesting. So if you have a narrator, that could be concerning. If you don't have a narrator, then honestly just put it in italics and move on.
Something
Yes.
I like to do is like sometimes I like to switch from the italics where it's like I wonder if I did this, if this would happen.
Yes.
From like when it's like in the actual text where it's like Jake wondered if he could do that. Sometimes I like to switch back and forth.
like a pro and
Yeah, like sometimes it's in the italics and sometimes it's like in the paragraph. Can I do that? Like
Yes and no. In the regard that if you are doing a limited person dialogue, so for example, Percy Jackson is all from Percy Jackson's point of view, except for second series. We're not counting that. The first series is all from Percy Jackson's point of view. You'll notice that it never has anything like that because it is limited. And so as a result, you really should just do the italics. If it is not limited and it's like being narrated by someone or it is like jumping between perspectives and it's not limited, then that's fine. But generally, or if it's not from their perspective, like if you're saying he wondered, like for example, Jackson wondered what Felicia could be thinking about, and it's from Jackson's perspective, that's fine.
Yeah, that's
but
what
like
I'm
yeah,
doing.
but
It's
like
from their perspective, and it's not like the first person books.
yes, well that's not what I'm saying. So for example, he is wondering what Felicia is thinking about, and so he's pondering on that. If he's saying like I think she's thinking about cheerleading or whatever, that should be in italics. But if you just want to say he wondered what she was thinking about, end of sentence, then we're good. If you're gonna say specific things, you really should put it in italics.
Okay.
Yes. Question.
Yeah. So if it's like a specific thought,
Yes.
in first person, it should always be in dialogue and not prose, because that's unusual for a first person thing, because it's like them narrating the story. So it's them narrating their own thoughts, which makes more sense than them narrating that they're having thoughts.
Yes. So you'll notice that in False Prince, where because it's in first person, he'll often say things like, "Now you might be wondering why I was 2 seconds late to my own assassination," or whatever the flip the second book's line was.
That was a crazy
exactly.
line.
But that sounds like something he's thinking. That's because he's the narrator, so it works. If you're doing third person, it depends on whether it's limited or omniscient.
Okay.
So, any other follow-up questions regarding boring scenes / other things I've discussed? Then we can discuss that after I turn off the video. Okay. Last thing that I want to cover before I turn off the video. We have 2 contests currently going on. We have a poetry contest that ends at the end of June. When I say poetry, song lyrics also count. That is a form of poetry. It's just a sung version of poetry. That's literally all it is. Which is awesome and arguably cooler. But